healing is not what you think it is. It is really a deeper type of work that feels like it may have nothing to do with the current problem that you're focusing on, and yet it infiltrates your whole life. It creates this ripple effect. Welcome to episode 1 of the Wake Up podcast. I'm Natalie Rose, and I'm so excited that you're here. I'm excited to be here. It's taken me a while to muster up the courage to start, even though I've done a private podcast before. Maybe this one going public has more pressure associated with it. I don't know, but my perfectionism has been kicking in and causing me to procrastinate, and I'm just done with it. So moving forward, I'm here. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm not perfect, and I proudly own that. And part of the reason why I wanted to start this podcast is to help you feel like you don't have to be perfect either. Whether you're also a recovering perfectionist, or you struggle with food and body image issues, or you struggle with overworking and burnout, whatever it is, we are going to talk all things healing and stepping into the most authentic versions of ourselves so we can live a free, meaningful life where we feel present and fulfilled. In this episode, I want to share the purpose behind this podcast. I want to share what it's all about. I want to share a little bit about myself in case you're new here. I want to share who I am and what I do. And for those of you who do know me, I hope that this podcast will give me a chance to connect with you on a deeper level. I also have a special announcement about my personal life, which is important because it's going to inform this podcast, the future of this podcast, and what it can offer you. So hang tight, keep listening. I will share that towards the end of the episode. You will be the first to hear of this special announcement because I haven't announced it anywhere else but here. So I just want to thank you again for listening and for being here. It means a lot to me, and I'm excited to dive in. I've been on Instagram for years, but there's only so much that you can fit into a caption or a 1-minute reel. There's only so much that you can really capture. And I often find myself struggling to really convey the meaning or the story or the purpose behind a message that I'm trying to share. So my hope for this podcast is to be able to go into depth into a lot of the nuanced topics around food and body image and healing self-worth that you just can't explain over social media. But I would be lying if I said that this was all about you. And I mean that in the kindest way. Part of the reason I have started this podcast is to challenge myself. And this is something that I encourage my clients to do. I'm talking about often in my private membership, the community, and on Instagram, is that in order to heal from our past, things that are limiting us, that are no longer serving us, we have to step outside of our comfort zone. We have to challenge ourselves, even if we don't know what the outcome is going to be, especially if we don't know what the outcome is going to be. If we can't control how other people are going to feel or react to it, we have to challenge ourselves because that is how we learn to know that we are capable of more than shrinking ourselves down to our smallest selves. Challenging myself and stepping outside of my comfort zone, pushing myself beyond what has felt comfortable, pushing myself beyond my limits or my perceived limits has been the catalyst in my healing journey. And so that is something that I want to convey through this podcast. I mean, just to be completely honest, I've had low self-esteem my whole life. I've never enjoyed speaking. I've been described as shy and reserved. I'm definitely introverted, and it has held me back a lot in my life. I used to get by with doing speeches in grade school. But once I went to university where I didn't know anyone and I had to step up to do my first presentation in a class of 300 people, I had my very first panic attack. And I was like, what is this? I was fully prepared for that presentation. I felt confident going into it. And then I stepped up in front of the class and it was like my throat closed in, I choked up. And from that moment on, I never wanted to speak in front of people because I was afraid of that reaction happening. I had totally choked up and like I bombed that presentation so bad. It really turned into social anxiety and performance anxiety. I had had social anxiety as well throughout high school. Well, I mean, my whole life I've been nervous around people, you know, scared to approach people, closed off. Where was I going with this? And so anyways, the point of the story is that I struggled a lot with speaking to people. And so I've been avoiding YouTube and a podcast for years and years despite, people from my audience requesting it because I just didn't believe in myself. I didn't believe that I had the ability to speak and to use my voice. Even just showing up today helps me feel a sense of pride because it reminds me of how far I've come. I've had to work consistently to overcome performance anxiety and social anxiety for years and years. Showing up today reinforces the belief that I can do what I put my mind to. And it's that very experience of working really hard at something and proving to yourself that you are competent that underlies healing, even if it feels completely unrelated to food and body image issues or a type of trauma that you've experienced in the past. It's all related. And that's part of what I am here to talk about is that healing is not what you think it is. It is really a deeper type of work that feels like it may have nothing to do with the current problem that you're focusing on, and yet it infiltrates your whole life. It creates this ripple effect. So, for example, for me, overcoming social anxiety, using my voice has allowed me to create this community. Creating this community has allowed me to recognize my passion and my purpose, which is serving others in this community and helping them heal and grow. And therefore, I developed my membership program called The Community, which is now my business, my livelihood. It brings me so much joy and fulfillment. And I would have never known that. I would have never been able to find this passion of mine if I hadn't challenged myself. On that note, throughout this podcast, I want to explore these deeper topics of self-acceptance and self-worth and emotional wellness. I also want to share insights on relationships and mental health and personal growth. I think of food and body image issues as surface level symptoms. When we are obsessed with food or we are so dissatisfied with our body and constantly thinking about how we can change it or prevent it from changing, these are just outer layer symptoms. They're symptoms of a deeper rooted problem, like issues with disconnection, low self-worth, self-doubt, and lacking a sense of purpose. That's what I'm passionate about speaking about, is really getting to the roots of your problem, which you think is about food in your body, but it is so much more than that. And so in case this is the first time you're stumbling across me or you don't really know me that well, I'm a licensed therapist. I'm also a coach, and I specialize in food and body image and self-esteem and self-worth. So my goal is to guide you through healing from food and body image issues, building your self-esteem and self-worth, enhancing your relationships and your life outside of food and body image, and ultimately creating a life worth living, which is a life that you feel is authentic to you, that you feel excited about and present, not consumed with food and body image issues or what other people are thinking of you. Part of what has led me into this work is my own experience with low self-worth, which I didn't realize until much later in my journey, as it showed up mostly with an obsession with food and dieting, and from dieting to binge eating, from binge eating to obsession with clean eating, endless body shame and dissatisfaction, and just a cycle of turmoil. I've also experienced grief and loss in my life. I lost my mother when I was 24. This plays a huge role in my story, both why I struggled and also how I began my healing journey. And so I'm really excited to share all of that with you in this podcast. Won't share everything in today's episode, but there will be future episodes where I go deeper into these snippets of my story. I also want to share parts of my life now that model what life can look like after healing. Don't get me wrong, healing doesn't end. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I'm healed. In fact, I'm happy to share with you that healing continues after you get to a good place with food in your body. There are so many other challenges that we face in life, like relationship problems, even with friendships or with partners, marriage, motherhood, financial issues, finding your passion, taxes. I mean, I'm not going to get into taxes in this podcast, but like just normal life struggles that maybe, I didn't even get a chance to think about when I was so preoccupied with food in my body. So all these things piled up. And although I was ecstatic to be liberated from food and body obsession, it's like, okay, well, now I've got to think about these things and how am I going to work through these things? And so I want to share different elements of normal life transitions because it's all part of the process of growth and evolution and becoming the best version of yourself. I know that sounds really corny, but I don't know how else to describe it. And another thing is, I don't want you to think that we always have to be working on ourselves. Yes, I want this podcast to largely be about personal development, but I also very much embrace a permission to relax, like permission to take a break and pause and just enjoy your life as well. So there will be lots of that as well. I also wanted to share a little bit about the story behind my Instagram handle. So if you have come here from Instagram or from TikTok, you may know me as Wakeupandsmelltherosay. This podcast is called Wake Up, and it all stems from partly the saying, wake up and smell the roses, partly because my middle name is Rose and I had a nickname, Rose. So that's where the rose comes from in Wake Up and Smell the Rose. So I kind of merged the two. But the reason why the saying, wake up and smell the roses, is such an important or meaningful quote in my life is because there was a point in time where, one, I had to wake up and smell the roses. Like I had to recognize that what I was doing was not working anymore. So I had to choose differently and do differently if I wanted to experience a different outcome. The specific moment that comes up for me when I think about that is a time when I was feeling really uncomfortable after a weekend or maybe a week of just like letting loose, like hanging out with friends, being free, enjoying all my favorite foods, not rushing to the gym. I think I had been at a cottage or something like that. And come Monday, I was feeling bloated and uncomfortable in my body. And I had this urge to just repeat what I would normally do, which is like get really strict with my diet. And I realized in that moment, this is what is perpetuating the cycle. You wouldn't feel so uncomfortable after just a normal period of living if you weren't so restrictive the rest of the time. So I told myself, no, you're not doing that this time. You're going to eat normal, balanced meals. So what that meant was no restricting of food groups like I would have wanted to do, which I had been doing, which I realized wasn't working anymore. So I just ate normally. And I know that that sounds so hard. Like you don't tell someone who's struggling with food in their body to just eat normally. But I guess what normal meant for me then was eating in a balanced way, not restricting anything major, having a meal that had carbs, having a sweet treat if I wanted it. And that actually really set in motion this, well, one, it taught me that I could tolerate discomfort by eating in a balanced way rather than restricting really hard and experiencing change quicker. Sure, it took me longer to feel more like myself again, like for the bloating to go away, but I overall learned that I could tolerate that discomfort until ultimately I felt better without having to engage in damaging behaviors like over restriction. And so that was one piece of the puzzle. I had to change my behaviors in order to change how I felt. Of course, another part of my healing journey is actually getting to know myself on a deeper level, building a better relationship with my emotions, because that was all partly driving the restrictive eating, which would then fuel the binge eating. And like I said, I also had a period of obsessively healthy eating as well, which I will get into. Another reason why Wake Up and Smell the Roses means so much to me is because I've also struggled with a history of mental health issues like depression and anxiety. A therapist once told me that she thought I had been living in a chronic state of sadness for a long time, which is so sad to think about, but it's so true. I experienced this flatness, this absence of joy for so long, which I think is also partly what drove my disordered eating and caused me to strive to perfect my body, thinking that that would make me happy, but it didn't, of course. And so as I started healing my relationship with food and my body and eating more and just saying yes to new things in my life, and also going to therapy and addressing the depression, and also taking a medication at one point in my journey as well, it was like my depression lifted. And all of a sudden, I could see the world in color again. Whereas before that, the world felt largely gray, which is hard to even think about now because I haven't felt that way in so long. But it was almost like one day I stepped outside and I noticed the flowers. And I was kind of like, whoa, those look so beautiful. Like, have those always been there? And I kept walking and just noticed more flowers and color. And so I became very passionate and interested in flowers. I started buying flowers for myself, usually roses, because like I said, my middle name's Rose. So roses are just naturally one of my favorite kinds of flowers. And that was around the time that I started my Instagram and I started sharing about my journey of overcoming disordered eating and binge eating. But I would also post, the flowers that I would get each week or the flowers I would see on my daily walk. So Wake Up and Smell the Rosé. That is how it came to be, and that is the meaning behind it. Overall, just waking up to reality, waking up to life, being able to experience life in a joyful way, being open to new possibilities, and more importantly, like I said, starting to challenge myself and pushing myself out of my comfort zone. Waking up to what I needed to do to experience change in my life, but also in how I felt about myself and about others and about my life. And that is ultimately what I'm here to help you do as well. I also want to share another example of a meaningful moment in my healing journey where I pushed myself out of my comfort zone and it had a lasting impact on my sense of competence and self-worth and optimism and hope, which ultimately fueled my healing journey with food in my body. Okay, so this was after I started my Instagram. Wake Up and Smell the Rosé was a thing. It was growing. Oh, I should have mentioned this part. So it started off as a food blog. I would share my beautiful breakfast bowls. At the time, I was really into smoothies and oatmeal. I would share these elaborate bowls and I was gaining a following. After consistent posting for about a year, all of a sudden I had like 30,000 followers. And what they were attracted to was not just these aesthetically beautiful bowls that I was posting, but my words. I was using my voice. I was almost using Instagram as my diary. And I remember people commenting on like how positive my mindset was. And that was wild because like I said, I had always experienced depression and chronic sadness. So my thoughts had always been really negative. And so people were really connecting with my story and my journey. And they too were healing their relationship with food or wanting to. And so anyways, I had this Instagram and then I was in grad school studying my master's degree in counseling and clinical psychology. And I had to go and do my practicum, like my placement, my internship, whatever you want to call it. And I chose to do my internship at a jail. And I had never been in a jail before, but I'd always been interested in forensics and crime, forensic psychology. And so I was so excited that I showed up to jail on the first day. And my initial confidence quickly plummeted plummeted as soon as I started working with clients because the anxiety kicked in. The anxiety that I thought I had gotten a bit of a handle on through like doing presentations in grad school and that kind of stuff quickly came back up when I was basically having to perform in front of my supervisors. Like I had to show them my skills and I wasn't confident in myself. I actually had no confidence in myself when I actually sat down to practice. I didn't know what to do. I had no skills. I hadn't been prepared. I mean, school taught me a lot of theory and things like that, but unless you actually do therapy, you don't learn. So I showed up, and one of the reasons I was so anxious and paralyzed by anxiety, in fact, was because I really respected my supervisors. I was shadowing them and seeing their work and their skill. And I was like, holy cow, like these people are talented. I want to be in their shoes. They're here and I'm like below the bottom. That's how I felt. And so it wasn't even a conscious choice for me to beat myself up about not being good enough. It was totally physical. I would get into a room with a client, and of course, one of my supervisors would be shadowing me to observe and to see how I was doing, and I would just completely clam up. The thought of being judged by them was paralyzing. You know, I remember at one point I was dissociating, like I wasn't even present. And my supervisor was like, Natalie, I can't trust you to work with these clients if you're not going to be present, right? Like these people are vulnerable and they need to be able to trust you to work with them. And that crushed me. The anxiety just took on its own life. I remember I would be sitting there with the other students and my supervisors, and we would be in like a consultation group, and my anxiety hijacked my brain. My eyes were tunnel vision, hyper focusing on everyone else's reactions to me. So for example, if I would say something, my brain would be tuning into how they might be perceiving me, what they might be thinking about me. That's called mind reading. Tuning into their inflections of their voice, their facial language, their body language, you know, like trying to see if they were judging me negatively, because I was judging me negatively. I would go home and I would cry to my best friend, like, oh, I don't even remember what I said to her, but I would cry hysterically, just feeling like I don't know what I'm doing. I'm bombing this. I am failing this. And I mean, she would reassure me the best that she could. She would say that she was extremely nervous when she was starting therapy too. And you know, just to keep trying, like just to keep going. And so when I felt like I was in the wrong place, in the wrong profession, I should just give up. I can't handle the judgment, the pressure of not being good enough. I persevered. I shared my experience with my partner at the time, who's now my husband, and he listened without judgment. And he sat down with me and he said, listen, like you just have to make a plan. You just have to think about like what you need to do, which was I needed to work on my therapeutic skills. And you just need to plan out how you're going to do it, how often you're going to do it, stick to that plan. And that's how you get better. And like, of course, that sounds so simple, but when anxiety and self-doubt and old core beliefs of not being good enough that stemmed from past experiences of being rejected in social circles, you know, maybe criticized by past teachers, things like that stick with you. Maybe not consciously, maybe I wasn't thinking of those experiences consciously at that time, but your nervous system holds on to that adversity and it remembers and it changes how you show up in vulnerable situations like this. Anyways, so I sat down with him and created that plan and I carried out that plan. I remember I would record myself in like a mock therapy session and like, oh my God, you must know if you've ever tried to film yourself working on something like a presentation or a skill that you're not good at yet, it's so cringeworthy, right? But I would do that and I would watch it back. And I even challenged myself further by starting to record my sessions and showing those recordings to my supervisor so she could give me feedback. That was like the next level up, okay? This was graded exposure therapy for me, right? I was becoming a therapist, but I was doing graded exposure therapy to build my skills. And over time, I got better. not only did I get better, but I extended my internship, which was supposed to be 6 months. I extended it to a full year. And by the end of graduating that full year, I had already been training new students. My supervisors were proud of me. They got me like a going away gift. I kept in touch with my supervisor after that. She became someone I would consult with. And overall, it just ended up being a life-changing experience because it showed me that I can persevere, that I can do what I set my mind to, that anxiety doesn't control me. It just really, really built my confidence and it contributed to my self-worth because something that I realized that I valued was perseverance. I valued learning, that it's okay to be bad at something and then to work on your skills and get better. And don't get me wrong, I didn't leave there thinking I was the best therapist in the world. It wasn't about becoming the best. It was about going from here to here and being then confident that I could keep going up and up throughout the years. And I did. And I am confident in my therapeutic skills now. But back then, I was not. So how does this tie into my relationship with food and my body? Well, the thing is, when you begin to value yourself on a deeper level, there's less importance put on your external value. The parts of you that society values, such as how thin and athletic and fit you are, how healthy you eat. That shit didn't matter as much when I had a deeper sense of value and purpose and connection to myself and to others. And that was an instrumental part of my journey that I will never forget. And like I said, it's something that I take with me and I teach to clients and I encourage them to push themselves and challenge themselves and just see how that's going to impact your relationship with food and with your body and with yourself. Okay. I think it's time now to share a special announcement with you. Like I said, I haven't shared this with anyone except my immediate family, a couple of my best friends, and that's it. So I hope this shows how much I value you being here and listening up until this point, because this is something that's special to me. It's so weird to say out loud. I'm pregnant. I'm expecting my first baby. And yeah, it's actually so weird to say because it was a journey to get here. This didn't happen easily. And I will share that story another day. But the reason why I wanted to share this with you is because this is a new part of my life and a new part of my journey, a new hurdle and major life transition that, hey, might stir up some body image stuff. You know, your body goes through a lot of changes during pregnancy. I'm only in my 13th week, so I'm just finishing up the first trimester, and my body has already changed dramatically. Well, okay, not dramatically, but significantly. A lot of things have changed. My routine, the way I feel in my body, my hunger levels, my exercise levels, a lot has changed. I want to talk about how important it was for me to heal, like to work on my relationship with my body, with food, and with myself before pregnancy, how I think that that's helping me manage pregnancy so far. I also want to talk about the experiences of pregnancy and later motherhood for those of you who are mothers or who are wanting to become mothers one day. So this will be part of what I share here on my podcast as well. Another reason why I started this podcast is to expand and deepen my community with you guys who may also be struggling with food or with your body or with self-doubt or with finding your passion and purpose in life or with motherhood or soon to be motherhood or with your marriage or your friendships or relationships. And I want to give you a chance to get to know what it could be like to work with me as well, because I've mentioned it before, but I have created a community membership of women on a journey of healing their relationships with food, with their bodies, and with themselves. And it has been overwhelmingly rewarding to witness their transformations, but also the experience of developing the community, launching it, building it, growing it, watching it evolve, evolving with it has also been a huge part of my healing journey. It has also been one of those major challenges that has taught me that I can do anything that I put my mind to. When I was working on building the community, it was almost like I overcame the obsession with with food and body, but then kind of like developed a new obsession with work. I was overworking to build this community. And I mean, that's the reality of entrepreneurship. Sometimes you do have to go the extreme just to get it built. And it takes a lot of time, especially if you have a job, a day job already. And that was what was the case for me. And so I, went to the other extreme. Like I neglected my self-care. I hadn't worked out in like months. I hadn't contributed to my household because I was so preoccupied with building this thing. And it had a negative impact on my marriage. I was putting everything into this and neglecting everything else. And that impact was something I had to work through. And so it taught me the importance of balance of, yes, it's amazing to have passions and dreams, but just like we can't have an imbalanced diet or an imbalanced lifestyle where we're only exercising and not socializing with friends, or vice versa, avoiding exercise and only going out and drinking and eating and things like that. Balance is so important there. It's also important in our work, in our personal life. And so I learned that through the experience of building the community. I also learned again how essential community is in the healing journey. I've watched clients' transformations happen rapidly. I mean, I've seen huge change within a couple months, whereas working with clients one-to-one, the transformation tends to be a lot more drawn out because they're not getting the impact of showing up vulnerably in front of others who are going through the same thing. Not only that, healing is lonely. It is so lonely to be essentially rewriting everything that you used to know and do with a new version of yourself. As exciting as it can be too, it's lonely. And when you're working with someone one-to-one, yes, they have you, but then outside of session, it's like there's no one else in their life to understand why they're making the choices they're making, letting go of the old version of themselves. And sometimes the new version of you doesn't jive with your past relationships. And so it can be hard to build new relationships. And so that's where community comes in, where it's like you don't feel alone anymore. You're building these new relationships with people who are sharing the same values as you, and you just have extra support. I mean, one of my members described it as like having 6 therapists in a room, because it's not just me they want to hear from, they want to hear from everyone else's experience as well. So I will be sharing more about my membership program, The CommunEATy, about how it has impacted my journey in personal development and how it could potentially impact yours. I want to give you a chance to see whether you would be a good fit and whether this is something that could be life-changing for you as well. If you have enjoyed this episode so far, I encourage you to subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube, to subscribe to my podcast, to listen, follow along, share with anyone else who's also on a journey of healing their relationship with food, with their body, or most importantly, with themselves. And just to give you a sneak peek into the next few episodes, I'm going to be sharing a few signs that it's time to work on your relationship with your body. I'm going to be answering the question of, is there such thing as a positive body image? And I'm also going to have a guest speaker on, one of my best friends, and I'm going to confess to her some of the deepest secrets that I carried about my struggles with disordered eating that I had never shared with anyone else before. And you'll be really surprised by that episode. I think it really highlights how invisible disordered eating is. Whether or not you've ever experienced an eating disorder or disordered eating or chronic dieting, it doesn't really matter what label you give it. Food and body image issues are so invisible. You might be shocked by her response when I confessed to her all of these things that I went through that I thought were obvious to everyone else. I felt so much shame about them. And despite her being my best friend for many, many years, she had no idea about the struggle that I went through. And that's another reason why I'm so passionate about this work, why I'm so excited about this podcast, is because food and body image issues and self-worth and perfectionism and all the stuff that we go through can be so isolating, and yet it only gets fueled by isolation. So I want to offer you a raw, unfiltered discussion about the nuances of food and body image issues and self-worth and healing, so that you no longer have to feel alone or isolated. This is a safe space for you. I also encourage you to reach out. If you don't don't already, follow me on Instagram at Wakeupandsmelltherosay. Subscribe to my newsletter. I'll put the links below. I offer a weekly Wake Up Wednesday newsletter, which offers micro tips and action steps to help you further your personal development and self-growth journey. And I encourage you to reach out, send me a message, tell me what you thought about this episode. If you have any specific questions you'd like me to address. So if you have made it this far, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening. It means a lot to me, and I can't wait to connect with you more. And I will leave you with one small challenge. I want you to think about what is one small way that you can push yourself outside of your comfort zone. Maybe that's even reaching out and messaging me if you really do have a question or a topic request. Maybe it's opening up to a friend, someone that you really trust, and sharing with them something that's going on, maybe a struggle that you're having. Maybe it's taking out your journal and writing out all of the thoughts and feelings that maybe you've been trying to suppress or avoid. Anything that makes you uncomfortable, I challenge you to it. Let me know how it went. All right, I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks again for listening, and take care.